Hi everybody, this is part 3 of my R53 blown engine video series. In this video, I stripped the block to get ready for rebuilding the engine. So I sent the valves from the old cylinder head down to Jan at RMW. It turns out most of the valves were bent, including all of the intake valves. So I started thinking, why would the intake valves be bent? Then I remembered I had an incident a few years back where my timing chain had skipped a couple of teeth due to a loose timing chain tensioner issue that developed when I was at the track. But the car ran fine after that. There was no loss of power. I did need to take apart the engine and clean up some of the damage from that, so I assumed everything was all perfectly good. But after looking at the timeline of that incident, I realized that it may have had something to do with the valves becoming weak. So I had a look at the pistons, the other 3 pistons, which are in good condition still. And I noticed there's a few little dimples on the top, and I wasn't sure if this was here by design or if that's because something had come into contact. You may recall that I replaced the engine for another Mini recently, and I kept those pistons. So looking at the pistons for that other engine, we can clearly see that there's no dimples on the piston head. You can actually see there's a few little black carbon marks which correspond to the location of the intake valve. The valve is coming very close to the piston but not touching. So this reinforced my theory that what happened was the valves opened at a slightly incorrect time, coming into contact and stressing the metal just a little bit. The valves coming into contact with the piston heads may have caused them to bend just enough. It was able to seal properly, but the stem of the valve got stressed, and the spark plug gap being a little bit too close may have caused it to run just lean enough that the valve got hot enough that it failed. There's also the possibility that this was due to insufficient fuel during wide open throttle. So I picked up a fuel filter and I'll be installing this, and I'll make a separate video on that. One other thing I'll be doing is installing an air-fuel ratio gauge so I can make sure the engine isn't running lean. So I picked up this set from Innovate Motorsports. It's a digital air-fuel ratio gauge that's sold together with a wideband O2 sensor. The O2 sensor that comes with the Generation 1 Mini is a narrowband sensor, and it cannot deliver the information necessary to get an accurate air-fuel ratio reading. So the idea here is you replace the O2 sensor with a wideband sensor. This one is supposed to have a narrowband output signal as well, so the engine control unit will be happy, but it will also deliver a signal that has the sufficient information to show the exact air-fuel ratio at all times. The gauge includes an alarm output, which I can probably hook up to a beeper or a light or something so you don't blow up your engine next time around. Alright, let's take apart this engine and get it ready to go to the machine shop. Be careful on this last bolt. This flywheel is really, really heavy. Oh, there we go. Yeah, rear main seal leak, so I'll fix that later. Next, I'll take off the oil filter housing. This is going to fall off and it's probably going to drain a bunch of oil, so I'll have an oil pan under here. Alright, we'll go ahead and lower the engine. I'm going to drop it down so I can turn it up on its side and get out those last 3 pistons. We'll get a good idea of if they've got the same kind of wrist pin damage or wrist pin bushing damage that the cylinder 1 had. Just push them on out. Okay, the bearing looks pretty good. And we don't have nearly as much wrist pin free play as on piston number 1. I'll get out piston number 3. Same thing, this one is very, very stiff. Okay, so I got all 3 pistons out. All these pistons look pretty good, other than the one that exploded. There doesn't seem to be any major damage to them. I think probably the loose wrist pin bushing happened as a part of the destruction of cylinder or piston number 1. The crankshaft looks good. It spins nice and free. There's absolutely no free play, and I don't see any damage to the crankshaft itself. And I may or may not replace these main bearings. Jan from RMW tells me that they don't fail. I'll probably just go ahead and use the bearings that are in here right now. I just talked to the machine shop. They say they can clean, bore, and hone this for a couple $100, but I need to remove everything from the block. So the Mini Cooper, rather than having main bearing caps, it's actually a girdle type, a split block type construction, where the crankshaft is held in by the bottom half of the block. So there's a bunch of 10 mil bolts around the outside. Unfortunately, they told me it's going to be probably 2 or 3 weeks before they can clean, bore, and hone this for me. So I'll get this down to the shop as soon as possible to get it lined up so that I have to wait as little as possible. Alright, just take a quick look, make sure there's no other bolts that I missed. Alright, we'll crack it on open. There it goes. There we go, that's the bottom half. Let's take a quick look at these bearings. They look to be in great shape. I may or may not reuse these. I'll take a quick look at how much they cost. I'll probably just go ahead and replace them if they're reasonably priced. I'm going to get the crankshaft out of here. Top bearings look pretty good as well. Next we'll remove the oil spray nozzles. Now it looks like these don't have a lock position, so I just need to make a mental note of what angle they are. Alright, what else do we need to take off? I'll remove this plug here. Looks like it's got some sealant on it which might not survive the block cleaning. Alright, we're going to want to number these bearings next. This is bearing number 1. And I don't need to mark up or lower because that's really obvious. The upper ones have a hole for the oil to get in, and the bottom ones are just solid. So there's no risk of being confused about that. I'll go ahead and put this back together. The machine shop said that they wanted both halves. And we'll bolt it all back together. They don't want the crankshaft, so I'll just put this out of the way someplace. I'll put a couple of cylinder head bolts in here to lift this up and put it in the trailer. I'll lift it up like that. Well, that's pretty darn useful, having an electric crane in your shop. Haha. Alright, quick update everybody. I was going to take this block to the machine shop and I was actually getting ready to go take it that day, but I thought carefully about it and had a change of plans. The machine shop had told me that they wanted the pistons at the same time as the block, and there would be a 2 to 3 week backlog to actually do the work. And I also had a closer look at the block, and I had doubts about whether a 0.5 millimeter bore would be enough to get rid of the damage. So I talked with Jan at RMW again, and he said that usually a 0.5 millimeter is enough, but if 1 millimeter is needed, it would take another 4 weeks to get the pistons. So that would mean up to 4 weeks for the pistons, plus another 2 to 3 weeks for the machine shop to do its work. I don't want to wait 7 weeks, so I started thinking about other options, such as a used motor or putting in a new short block, but those are both really expensive. And Jan had a better idea. Get a junkyard block where the rest of the engine is no good, but the block is okay, and just purchase the block, deglaze that, and bore and install the RMW pistons in that. So that's where we are now. Jan found a block for me, and I'm waiting for it to be delivered together with the head and the pistons. So I'm hoping to get all the parts by next week, and then I can start the rebuild. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned for part 4 where we start putting this motor back together. Be sure to subscribe to get notified about new videos. Click the like button if you like this video and share with your friends. Bye-bye.